with them.
Fair.
Brother Muslim, where were you going with that? Were you gonna? Because we wanted to address the room title.
Well, I mean, the reason I asked is because if you take the tradition seriously, I think it's pretty much a unanimous consensus on how you would answer this question, that there's only one will and one inseparable operation between the persons of the Trinity. The church fathers literally thought that if you believe that there are three wills in the Trinity, that entails that there are three gods. So Catholics and Protestants shouldn't really hesitate on that at all. I mean, sorry, Catholics and Orthodox. But Protestants who are a little bit more liberal with adhering to the tradition, obviously would really be the only group that would deny that in any sense. But even many Protestants wouldn't deny it.
Yeah, and to that I would just say, like, Christians have this tendency to, like, really like, for example, like, someone asked me which on the stage which view seems less heretical. That word heretical or heretics, I don't like using it, because when I speak of the diversity within Christian thought, um, I'm not picking sides per se, and I think, each view is valid within its respective tradition, and Christianity is way more diverse, and even Protestants. I was going to say Christianity is way more diverse than just Protestant, Orthodox, Roman Catholic. Even within Protestants, I mean, I'm pretty sure we're all aware of, there's hundreds of denominations, and then even within one denomination, people can believe what they want to believe. So by no means are Christians a monolith when it comes to Christian thought. And that's not to say anything about Christian movements that have died out and no longer exist in times past, and other divergent groups that often get unnoticed or unrepresented in these type of discussions. So I just want to say,
I
like,
mean, I agree. That's why I asked the question to begin with. That's why I was asking what your position is, because I recognize that there is diversity. So that's why I asked what your view was.
yeah, that's why. So I don't know. That's the answer, closest to my heart, if you will. But I will assume either three or one, based on based on his
Yeah, those are
nature
the
is
only
one.
options.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I'm just saying that if you take the tradition seriously, I'm not aware of a single church father that took the position that there were three wills in the Trinity. And even, I mean, you can look at things like the Third Council of Constantinople in 681, very clearly states that there's only one will in the Trinity, and that will is a property of nature and not of persons. And that's why it said that Christ, because he had two natures in the incarnate state, he had two wills. So, I mean, there's, from a historical point of view, there's post Nicaea, there's really no dispute about it.
If we're going to do historical, I mean, the Trinity in the Bible, it has been translated 1,000,001 times. So it's like the word, like it's like a game. So you have like a game of telephone. So I say this one
Sister,
thing.
please. Thank you for that, sister.
So I say this
I
one
already
thing.
said, sister, I already said that we're having one conversation at a time. So if you don't mind, just let's finish this conversation, please.
Okay, fair. I'm sorry.
All right? Really appreciate it. Thank you, sister.
yeah, I just Muslim in response. For example, let's deal with Jesus' identity, like whether or not he has two natures, two wills, etc. Christians have never disagreed. Never agreed on this, across the entire so-called church. And so, depending on where you land on that Jesus' identity, uh, that creates a different set of solutions with the Trinity. And hence, even within, like, Christian thoughts, hence the identity of Jesus was addressed first. And then once they ironed out, so to speak, the identity of Jesus, then they moved on to the Trinity. And so, and just to go back to like the diversity within Christian thought, and just citing one council, doesn't speak for the whole church.
No, I mean I'm
Just a
not
note.
claiming that, but I'm just saying, I'm just telling you. I mean, I can go through a list of, I mean, all of the church fathers from Saint Augustine, Cyril of Alexandria, Hilary, the Cappadocian fathers. I mean, we can go through them all one by one. It's a unanimous consensus. There's really no difference with respect to that.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. So, if
I mean, I'm not
Jesus,
aware of any. I'll just say this. If you do your own research and you're able to find a citation from what's considered a reputable source portraying that some church father or authority believed that there were three operations or three wills in the Trinity, I'd be happy to take a look at it. But as far as my research goes, I'm not aware of any such text whatsoever.
The inconsistency in that is just like key enough. Like, you really, the inconsistency, there's not enough people to back the Trinity. There's not enough people to say, like, this is what we believe. This is, the inconsistency in that. There's not enough. There's the fallible texts that are in that. They would say this and they would say that. Like, if it was the word of God, there would be it wouldn't be infallible. You cannot say this person was this age, and then they would say this is this age, but we believe in
Sister,
this.
sister,
There's so
sister,
many. There's
sister.
so many. It's
All right.
Yeah, I mean, that's
Clearly,
kind of a different point.
clearly this is not working out, sister. I asked you twice politely. Please do not step into the conversation because we're trying to keep this one-on-one. It's only fair because Devante is one person. He can only have one conversation at a time. So please, sister, I really don't understand why you have to put me in this situation.
Mm. Yeah, let me just read you one example. So Saint Cyril of Alexandria says, and I quote, "To attribute individual operations to each separate divine person is tantamount to saying that there are three separate and distinct gods." Close quote. So, I mean, that's one example. Like I said, I can go through
yeah,
numerous other examples, but I mean
right.
that was the view.
Okay, well, that was his view. That's
No,
my
I'm
only
saying
point.
that was the view amongst what are considered orthodox. If you want to take a heretical view, like Aryan view or something like that, that's a different story. But I'm talking about in terms of those that were establishing Trinitarian theology and creed in the 4th century post Nicaea onwards. That was the view. There was no other view.
And that type of sentiment is, I think, mistaken, and it has a lot to do with the the power struggle between the church, where the so-called Orthodox view is remembered in history, and the so-called heretical view is eventually like stifled out, essentially. And so my question to you is, you don't think that um, there were divergent views? You know, I
Go
assume that
ahead.
there were. I assume that there's divergent views, and this is why, hence the reason to, uh, for I forgot who you just quoted, but hence the reason for him to even mention that. And he was
Saint
probably,
Cyril of
I don't know,
Alexandria.
Cyril of Alexandria. I don't know what text that's in. Like I don't know what book that's
Yeah,
in,
I can send you
but
anything if you want.
or you can just tell me. But a lot of these early Christians were responding to other Christians, um, and there were heated debates over this discussion. And that just goes to show the diversity within the early church, and that they weren't all like on the same page. And
I'm saying
that's
on
all I'm
this
saying. That's
issue,
all I'm
Ava.
saying.
I'm
Okay.
saying I'm
Well,
saying the Trinitarians. I'm saying the Trinitarians were on the same page with this doctrine. If you want to talk about Aryans, or you want to talk about other views that did not hold to the Trinity, then sure. I'm not really disputing that. I'm talking about Trinitarians like Saint Athanasius, who was at the Council of Nicaea, the Cappadocian Fathers, Basil and the two Gregories, Saint Augustine, Saint Hilary, all of them. They all agreed on this. I mean, if you don't believe me, it's fine. I mean, I'm just saying you can do your own research. There's a good book actually that came out last year, which is on this subject. It's the only, as far as I know anyway, it's the only full length, uh, really treatment of this subject, and it's pretty good. So it covers all of this. But yeah, I'm not aware of anyone that was proposing Trinitarian theology post Nicaea that took the view that there are three wills in the Trinity. I'm not aware of anyone.
okay. I mean, I take that as an assumption, because what I know about the early church is that they disputed everything, and when it came to, and they weren't all in agreement, and when it came especially to the identity of Jesus and the Trinity, they were almost in complete disagreement. And but it looks like you need a concrete example, or you don't take that assumption. I take that assumption because I like, again, I mentioned the hypostatic union, or like the identity of Jesus. Like there were, first of all, there were Christians early on that didn't even believe Jesus was God. So that's not
No, I
even,
agree with that. I agree with that.
yeah,
But
yeah. So
remember
we,
what I said though. I said the ones that were claiming
yeah,
Trinitarianism,
you want to,
not the ones that were
right,
disputing it.
right, right. Yeah, you want to, so you want to narrow it down to to all the people who agree with each other. So then obviously you'll be right. But
No, I
again,
mean, sir, the title of the room is How Many Wills Exist Within the Trinity? So we're talking about people who believed in the Trinity. If somebody didn't believe that Jesus was God, then would they believe in the Trinity? Of course not.
yeah, yeah, you need an example. That's what you clearly need. So, what text were you citing? Maybe what text? Maybe we can go to the text, and because oftentimes they name the people that they're disputing against, and so would you count that as evidence? Or, and when you read them, you tend to pick up that they're disputing like a opposing view, which hints to like a divergent view that's present within Christianity, which will affirm the diversity that the point that I'm trying to drive home within the early church. So we can start there.
Oh, but
We can look at the text, and
yeah.
he might have referenced, who he's what quote unquote heretical Christian group he's disputing, and then that will prove my point.
Uh, what point are you trying to make exactly? You think that there were early Trinitarians in the fourth century that believed that there were three wills in the Trinity? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that I don't take your assumption that they're all like the will. How many wills of that
Yeah.
God has is off the table. I believe it was on the table because everything was on the table. I know enough to know that everything was on the table. Nothing was set upon, especially when it came to the Trinity, especially when it came to Jesus' identity. You know,
Um, yeah, but I'm just saying, what have you researched on this specific topic?
I that's what I said. I haven't researched this specific topic. Um, so quite
Yeah, so I
frankly,
mean, how would you know? It's I'm telling you,
it's
I've researched it and I don't see anything. That's why I said if you do, then I'd be happy to look at it. But what else do you want me to say from there?
for example, the whoever you cited, again, I keep forgetting, if you point out the book and the text, I can look at the text, and because like I said,
Yeah.
oftentimes they call out who they're arguing against, and a lot of times it's fellow Christians that they deem heretics.
Yeah, that is the case many times, but I'm saying the ones that they deem heretical, right, in this regard, they're not talking about Trinitarians that believe that their Father, Son, and Holy Spirit are all God. They share the same essence, but yet there's three wills and three operations. No.
Okay, I mean, all right. Yeah, I'm sorry I can't be of any, further help to you because I think you need a clear example and I don't have any. So, but
Yeah,
I
I
was just
mean, but
trying to.
that's fine. I'm not requesting one. All I said was if you do your own research and you do find a clear example, then I'd be happy to look at it. But right now you don't have one, and I can't give you
Yeah.
one. All I can do is give you examples of people who are saying the opposite.
Okay. Well, just you guys can move on to someone else, but just give me the reference you named, and we can start there, and I'll
Yeah,
read it
I'll
real
send
quick.
it to you in the back channel.
All right.
Sure. I just followed you, so if you
All right.
follow me
Cool.
back,
Yeah. Cool. Again,
then
as
I
a
can send you a
Christian, and
message.
yeah, yeah, sure, yeah. Again, as a Christian, I just wanted to stress the diversity within Christian thought. That's all.
Yeah. And I can just read another quote here if you want. Gregory of Nyssa, in his work on Not Three Gods, he says, since then the Holy Trinity fulfills every operation in a manner similar to that of which I have spoken, not by separate action according to the number of the persons, but so that there is one motion and disposition of the goodwill which is communicated from the Father through the Son to the Spirit. So again, the will is with respect to the Trinity and one operation in it, not according to the number of persons or three. Yeah, I mean, I can go through quotes all day long. John of Damascus says, identity of will and of operation, and of virtue and of power and of motion. That is, in this way, I say, indivisibly, and we know to be one God. So the claim is that there's one God because there's one will or operation in the Trinity. I mean, St. Augustine says the same thing, Ambrose. So, but yeah, I'll send you the first one I mentioned.
So Jake, would it be correct to say that if, like post-incarnation, once Jesus goes back, well, he's incarnated, and he's in his incarnated form, and he would obviously still possess the human nature, so he would still possess a human will in that case, wouldn't you say?
Say that again. Sorry, I was just trying to scroll through my phone to get him this. What? Can you just repeat that?
So post-incarnation, would it be correct to say that the Trinity would have two wills, because Jesus would retain his human nature and thus his human will?
No, I mean they wouldn't say that. No, they would just say that um, the Son possessed two wills, a human nature and a human will and a divine will. But they wouldn't say that there are two wills in the Trinity because of that.
Yeah, but why wouldn't they? Like, what stops them? What stops me from making that assertion?
Because the second will is only attached to um, the Son as a person in terms of communicating uh, what is true of the human nature to the person, but it's not communicated to the divine nature, which is shared amongst the persons.
Okay. So ultimately, they would have to believe in just one will for the Trinity.
Yeah, there's one will in the Trinity, but they believe that the Son has two wills, And you can say the Son has two wills in the sense that what is true of his human nature is then predicated to the Son as a person, but not to his human nature. So it wouldn't then get shared with the Father and the Holy Spirit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Also, I must say, because this just came to mind, that even modern day Christians will posit that God has three wills. And so don't even have to go back, into antiquity, But I assume it existed in antiquity because, there's nothing new under the sun, as Solomon says, but that's just an example for modern day Christians. They will argue that, that each personhood has a will of its own, but yet somehow, some way, their will agrees, in such a way that it's virtually one, but in essence, it's three.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they wouldn't be fully persons.
Yeah, but that's the point. That's a modern view. It's not really one that's grounded in any meaningful analysis of historical Trinitarianism.
Think about this, like in the 4th, 5th century, they were living in modernity. Nothing was this stuff was formulated. A harsh word with a negative connotation you might use invented. This was all modern. Even much later in like the 11th century, we have, for example, Saint Anselm, like putting out theories of Jesus's death and the atonement, etc. That changed the way Christians view the atonement since then. And so, like everything is up for discussion, and it has always been up for discussion. And the fact that a view is in so-called antiquity doesn't make it better per se. Just to
Well,
respect the diverse tradition within church, within Christian thought historically, because we're not just covering the New Testament at this point. We're discussing Christian thought post New Testament.
yeah. I mean, we're talking about historical theology, right? We're talking about what the people who claim to believe in the Trinity believed and what they wrote about in their texts and so on. I fully acknowledge that there were diversity of views on many different topics. I'm not disputing that at all. And I would agree with you that prior to the Council of Nicaea, there were many people that didn't believe that Jesus was God, or if they did say that Jesus was God, he was God in a different sense, not co equal, co eternal, and having the same essence as the Father. I acknowledge that. But I'm simply saying that once the Trinity was established, the people that held to the Trinity, this was their view, right? So, but again, I mean, you saying that, well, there are these issues where there were diversity and people disagreed, I'm granting that, but it doesn't follow from that they disagreed necessarily on every single topic.
Well, that's kind of you to be so charitable to the early church.
No, I mean, I'm just telling you, like you're talking about, well, what is their writings? Like, what are they refuting? For example, Athanasius, it was basically Athanasius against the world. That's what his nickname was, because he was proposing Trinitarianism and was very influential at the Council of Nicaea and post that in the 4th century. He wrote a text which is called Against the Aryans. People can access this online. And he, in this text, says that there's only one will. He says, "For by the same willing by which the Son is from the Father, he also loves and wills and honors the Father. And there is one will, which is from the Father and in the Son, so that in this respect, too, we can contemplate the Son in the Father and the Father in the Son." He explicitly says that there's one will. Again, in the same text, who can resist the inference that there is one power which orders and administers them, ordaining things well as it thinks fit? Now, yes, he's refuting another view, but the text is called Against the Arians. He's refuting Aryan heretics, saying that the Father and the Son have the same will. And it was actually an argument against the heretical Arians because they did not believe that the Father and the Son had the identical will. And because of that, at least one reason why they didn't believe that the Father and the Son possessed the same nature and essence, and therefore were not of equal status. And that's what he's refuting. He's actually using an argument inferring from the fact that they have one will to that they have one nature or one essence and therefore are one God. So yeah, he's refuting another view, but it's not another Trinitarian that just thinks that there are three wills instead of one will.
Well, then I guess the answer is we have the answer of the room.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm not you. You initially came on stage and said, you're not sure of it. You understand that there's a difference of opinion, and I grant that today there is a difference of opinion, but it's mainly amongst social Trinitarians and who are, for the most part, Protestants, because of the fact that they don't really feel that they need to have their theology anchored in, from a historical perspective. If you want to take that view or somebody else wants to take that view, that's fine. I mean, it's not really my business. I would think it would be problematic if my faith were uh, based on, in a large part, what these theologians said and what they established at such and such councils and so on. If my view was not actually clearly represented in early centuries, I would have a problem with that, because then I would say, well, is God really guiding the church? Why am I believing that there are three wills in the Trinity and really nobody believed that up until such and such time? So that's the angle that I would approach it from. But somebody like you or another Protestant, although you didn't like to use that name, I'm just saying for now, may not be persuaded by that reasoning. They may think, well, who really cares? If we think the Bible teaches X, we don't care when or who the first person was that clearly explained that there are three wills in the Trinity. We're going to believe it anyway. I mean, sure, you can take that view. Anybody's free to that. I'm simply trying to represent what I see is the proper historical analysis of it. And again, although I'm reading these quotes for you, and I'm happy to spend time with anyone who is interested enough to discuss these things, I'm not telling you or anybody else in the audience to take anything I'm saying for granted. Do your own research, check it out. Maybe there's something that I'm missing. I'm happy to take a look at it.
Yeah, and I just want to say, just again as a note of caution, when we study any type of history, we don't have the whole picture. And so, for example, the winners write history, that's a true saying within the church. And Christians were burning heretical texts that were by other Christians that they deemed heretical. And you have to remember that the Western church, or the so-called the great church or the mainstream church, had the backing of the Roman Empire to squash out every other divergent group of Christianity. And so when we do history, we have to keep that in mind. And then oftentimes when we're reading when we're learning of these divergent Christian groups, is from the perspective of those who are refuting them. And so we have to keep their biases in mind as well. And so just a note of caution, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you or somebody could always say, well, for all we know, there were Christian Trinitarians that did believe that there were three wills in the Trinity. We just have no documentation of it. I mean, sure, that's fine if somebody wants to say that. I mean, I'm not really persuaded by that, but for sure. I mean, I would want to be on the side of people like Athanasius and Augustine and the Cappadocian Fathers, right? If my view were not in accord with like the consensus of these Trinitarian thinkers, it would get me to pause to say, well, maybe I've got something wrong here. But, you may not think that way, and that's fine.
I mean, I think maybe we're talking past each other because I see where you're coming from, obviously, but I'm just like, again, we're limited from our modern perspective. We're privileged to have all this literature come to us and judge it based off of their testimony, but within their world, that wasn't the case. There were bishops who disagreed amongst each other vehemently, and we were not there to really appreciate the diversity that was present within the early church. And so yeah, I get it, and I get your sentiment. But for me, I'm trying to remove these modern biases and realize that the way that even Christian thought is often taught is from the side of the winners who had the backing of the Roman Empire to not only solidify their religion economically, but even gave the stamp of power, so to speak, from Rome, and to squash out the dissenting Christian views. And I want to recapture those so-called heretical views, not because they're heretical, but because they tell a story that we don't get to appreciate, if we're looking at it from one side, which is again from the perspective of those who, the winners, if you will. And so that's all. I'm not saying anything. I'm not trying
Yeah, I
to
agree with
educate.
that.
Yeah, that's all.
No, I mean,
I'm a
I agree with
student
that.
of,
Yeah. I'm just saying I don't see that
yeah.
on this particular issue. That's all I'm saying. I mean, look, if you want, I mean, obviously I'm a Muslim, so I mean, I'm not advocating for Trinitarian theology. I'm not advocating for either one or three wills in Trinity. I think they're both false, right? And I think that when you go back earlier than the Council of Nicaea, you see an even clearer diversity of people not accepting the Trinity. Some people not even talking about it. Some people saying that Jesus was God, but the way in which they mean that is not the way which was later to be conceived. Some people not claiming that he was God whatsoever. I mean, you can go to some of the earliest Christian apologists like Justin Martyr, who explicitly says that even in his own church, there are some people that believed that Jesus was the Messiah, but held him to be, quote unquote, a man of men. And he says he doesn't agree with them, but when he's trying to actually convince a Jew in his famous dialogue with Trypho, he's trying to convince a Jew that Jesus is the Messiah. And he said, look, even if you don't believe me that he was like a second God, which Justin Martyr calls him, he says, at the very least, Trypho, you should believe as a Jew that Jesus was the Messiah, right? Which I agree with. And he goes on to explicitly say there are some of his own friends who don't agree with him about this and believe he was a Messiah, but don't believe he's God. So, yeah, I fully grant that. And the earlier and earlier you go back, you're perfectly right that there is a diversity of views, but I'm making a very, very specific claim. I'm saying once the Trinitarian doctrine was established and being taught authoritatively in the 4th century, all of the key figures involved who were espousing such a doctrine explained in their writings that it was necessary to affirm that there's only one will in the Trinity and one set of inseparable operations and not three. That's all I'm saying. Before Nicaea, you have all sorts of different views. You have non-Trinitarian views, and you have, of course, views in which there's no even mention that Jesus is God or a part of a Trinity. So, I mean, I'm agreeing with you. I'm just saying that if you are a Trinitarian and you do take the, some type of analysis of history seriously, then you should believe that there's one will in the Trinity. I mean, that's just my claim. Otherwise, you're taking a view that isn't really rooted in historical Trinitarianism.